Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Prophet Noah series. We're continuing on with Musa's Ark. This episode is titled Weaving Our Way Through the World. We're going to continue showing the continuity and connections between Nabi's Yusuf and Nabi Musa, alayhum salam. Peace be upon both of them. So we've been exploring the past couple episodes some potential fresh ways of looking at Bani Israel as a microcosm of our current worldwide multi-ethnic, multilingual, diverse ummah. So an Islamic ummah in microcosm in ancient Egypt. Or as symbolically representing an ummah in the midst of a world of corruption and devil-tech and dajjalic behavior, where people strive to maintain righteousness and draw near unto the truth, following a spiritual guide. First Nabi Yusuf, later Nabi Musa. So let's just think about a few connections here. So when we talk about Bani Israel as a multi-ethnic ummah in microcosm, an Islamic community, as the Quran tells us again and again about prophets practicing Islam in some form, although people have often conflated it and considered it to be identical or very similar to the Muhammadan ummah, the Muhammadan expression of Islam. And I think that this is potentially problematic, but yet it's not entirely untrue either. So one of the things to consider is that Nabi Yusuf, he had a coat of many colors. This coat of many colors, to me, represents a multicolored, multi-ethnic community, all together. And a garment is a protective cover. Our skin is a garment. Our skin is a protective covering. And when we consider this garment, I even read a long time ago that there some of the early Christians, that they read the Joseph story in the Bible, who is the same. It's basically Yusuf, but a corrupted form of Yusuf to some extent. They would view the Joseph story as he's an archetype of Jesus Christ, of Isa the Messiah, alayhi salam, and that his coat of many colors symbolized the diverse community that was going to follow Jesus and follow Isa. So this is interesting. So now, when we go back to Nabi Yusuf, and then we compare him to Nabi Musa. Remember, Nabi Musa, we discussed that he was saved in a basket that was covered with tar or pitch. And I believe I said it was pine tar, but I checked back and it just says tar and pitch from some of the translations I read. So it's got a protective seal that prevents water from coming into it. And so the baby is protected in this basket, and he's put into the reeds along the Nile River. And it's a woven basket. Now, this is an ark. It's a type of ark. And Nabi Yusuf's coat of many colors is a protective garment. So we've got a protective vehicle, a protective basket, and we've got a protective coat that's beautiful. And they are both woven. So we've got this weaving theme in both instances, and both relate to a worldwide diverse ummah, diverse community of humanity that both prophets had a love for, a very diverse range of people. Although the Joseph story perverts Yusuf's story and makes it out as if he enslaves everybody, which is wrong-headed, and I believe that's a very pharaonic move, and demonstrates we actually get closer to the identity of some of the people who began corrupting the biblical materials. And Allah hides truth for people in the end times to find. If people have eyes to see, ears to hear, a heart to feel, know, and understand, and surrender to truth, and go into an egoless flow state so that the syntheses, all the strands can come together and be woven together to see the big picture. So we've got these protective garments, or protective shielding, so to speak, the basket and the coat of many colors. With the basket, what's interesting is I was reading that it was made from papyrus. Papyrus is the original paper. This is what many ancients would write upon. Many of the ancient Egyptians, they would write down histories, business dealings, scriptures, philosophical documents, etc., upon papyrus. So this basket's made of papyrus. It's a woven basket. Also, the coat of many colors is something that can be read symbolically as well. Also, what's interesting is Nebi Musa is put into the Nile River, which floods annually, and he was in a reed bed, a bed of reeds on the river that grew on the side of it. And so reeds can be used for writing instruments, to make a stylus. And this was done until very recently. People would turn reeds into pins. And also later, when Nebi Musa splits the sea, in some translations it is the Red Sea, which separates northeast Africa from Arabia, because actually Arabia is part of Africa. They're part of the same continent and the same plate. But there is the Red Sea separates them, and obviously now we've got the Suez Canal there. But there was an area that was a swampy area called the Sea of Reeds. And so some scholars have said that that's actually what Musa split, was the Sea of Reeds. So at first he's put into the reeds, later he splits the reeds with his staff. So this is interesting symbolism to think about. And also remember, Musa is going to be very associated with writing, with the scriptures that pass down through history. So this is kind of interesting. Both of them were literate men. Both of them were very influential in ancient Egyptian society, according to these scriptures. Also, when I said weaving through the world, both come from ancient nomadic backgrounds. All of humanity is originally nomadic. We were gatherers originally. Hunting comes later, but we were originally gatherers, and going back to the very, very early days. And so, Nebi Yusuf clearly came from a nomadic background, and we'll see that after death, he returns to a nomadic background. Nebi Musa came from a nomadic background, is raised in a stationary condition in Egyptian society, and then later, during his exile, he returns to his nomadic roots, is nomadic for quite a long time. Then he comes to Egypt. After enlightenment, once he has his prophetic mission, he comes to Egypt, not just to save Bani Israel, but I would argue that all of the slaves were identifying as Bani Israel at this point, and he frees them all. He brings them all to safety. And, Allahu Alam, but these are some things that I think are implicit in the text. And when we're looking at the broader story, some people are very obsessed with the Quran and the Bible have to be read as history books. And I would argue that that's not the primary purpose of either scriptures, either set of scriptures. In fact, it's about truth. And the Quran is true when you look at it holistically, you look at it symbolically, you look at it in so many different angles, and you will find truth that can be applicable and transformative in our lives. And it is not contingent upon the historicity of it. And I think that that's a wrong-headed approach. I'm not saying that things aren't historical. There's a lot that we can learn about history, but it's archetypical in the way it reads people, places, and things. So they're almost like meditations on the themes, on the people, and the events and the contexts. So just quickly to end it is, and then Nebi Musa brings his people back into wandering. So they began with wandering, and then they go back to wandering. So and when we're wandering, we're weaving our way through the landscape, and his people were weaving their way through the wilderness for 40 years. So, and then they had been enslaved for 400 years, is the story. And there's much that we can learn from this in a symbolic way. But just consider that this weaving theme, also a writing theme, appears within both stories. It's very fascinating when we look that the prophets contain one another. They each contain lessons connecting them to prior prophets and future prophets. And we can see these themes appear. So for instance, with our beloved Nebi, peace be upon him, notice that he makes hijrah when he is endangered, and he brings his people from a dangerous situation to Medina, making hijrah. And first to Ethiopia, some of them went to Abyssinia. But this is the Exodus. The biblical Exodus is a hijrah, leaving the dangers of the corrupt Egyptian lands and going into the wilderness. So they're going from an artificial constructed way of life. Now, it was still, their artificial world was still much more natural and organic than the artificial world that we live within. But we're returning to more of a wilderness environment. So we go from an artificial environment to a wilderness environment, more into nature. So anyway, I just wanted to leave you with these thoughts. Consider the role of weaving, the symbolism of weaving, also the relationship of when we write, we're weaving our way through the paper, through the text, at least in the traditional way of writing, whether it was on papyrus, papyri, whether it was in the codices, whether they were on scrolls. A codex is a book. On paper, etc. We think of writing a bit differently now because of the digital experience. But anyway, in the next episode, we will discuss a bit how Nabi Yusuf returns to a nomadic life, inshallah. Till then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.